So we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us. I'm Dreama Gentry. I'm here in Berea, Kentucky today. I'm the Executive Director of Partners for Education. And at Partners for Education, we work here in Appalachian, Kentucky to ensure that all students succeed, cradle to career. We're one of our key partners in that work here in Appalachian, Kentucky is Save the Children. And so I'm excited today to be here with friends and colleagues from Save the Children. We're here today to launch. It's exciting. We're launching this rural library network. And I want to give you a little bit of information on the network and what we envision before I welcome my guest to join us. So the Rural Library Network, it's a way to engage, connect, and support rural libraries from around the country. We've seen here and I know from my own personal experience, the power of libraries to be central to community and especially supporting kids from birth all the way up to career and then even more. So the Rural Library Network is our opportunity to bring together libraries, public libraries, school libraries, higher ed libraries, and those that support libraries, bring them together in this virtual environment on a regular basis to support them, connect them to resources, but also listen to the concerns, listen to the best practices, and really activate a community. We welcome any library to join us I often get asked, what's rural, right? How do you determine if a place is rural? And what we say is, if you think you're working in a rural place, join us, right? It is really, we want folks who identify as rural to come together. There'll be 3 prongs to the network. The first will be monthly webinars that will have virtual offerings where we feature the best practices from your all's libraries, from other libraries, and bring in national partners and opportunities. There'll be summits. We had a summit back in December on 3rd grade reading, but intensive deep dives and opportunities to learn and share together to really think about how do we make libraries those centers of community. And the third will be a fellowship for 22 librarians to work together over the next year and a half to bring resources into their communities and to really activate around 3rd grade reading. So that's sort of the network. We're here to launch it today. I don't anticipate today's launch will take the whole hour. So we're hoping to give you some time back at the end because we know that your time is so important and we appreciate you being with us today. So I'm thrilled to be joined by my friends, by my colleagues from Save the Children. And today I'm joined by Mark Shriver. Mark's the Senior Vice President of U.S. Programs and Advocacy at Save the Children. I'm joined by Jennifer Garner, award-winning actor, philanthropist, entrepreneur, Save the Children trustee, and Shane Garver, the Senior Director of Rural Education at Save the Children. So I want to start by inviting you, and Mark, I'll start with you, inviting you to take a moment to share why you're committed to rural places and why Save the Children is engaged in this work in this network.
So much, Dreama. I trust everyone can hear me. It's great to be here. I'm so excited when you say we're launching the network. How exciting is that? A network of rural libraries all across the country. Just so honored to be partnering with you and Partners for Education, obviously Berea College. I'll be joined by my colleagues and friends, Shane Garver and Jennifer Garner in a minute. Garver and Garner. There we go. I don't know if you can, I don't think folks can see Jennifer and Shane right now, but they're smiling away. They're very excited to be joining in here, and they'll probably cut me off in a second, or at least Jennifer will, because we've really been around the country, Dreama, as you know, in our work for Save the Children, working so closely with you and your colleagues in Kentucky. Shane is based in Kentucky. Jennifer, our last trip that Jennifer and I took together was in rural Kentucky. And as I hope many of your colleagues here, librarians across the country know, Save the Children has been around for over 100 years as an organization, been here in the United States since the Great Depression, started in Kentucky. Was really an effort to feed kids that were impacted by the Great Depression. And I've been at SAVE for the last, I think almost 18 years. And what I know, I can see Jennifer's reaction is, but it's been a while, but it's great. And we're in rural America, and that's the niche that Save the Children has always been in. and is really committed to. There are so many groups doing good work in urban and suburban areas. And we felt that there was a profound need and have been in that rural America for so long, spread from the West Coast in Washington State and California all the way Southwest, the Southeast, the entire country. And the focus on the importance of getting kids to enter kindergarten ready to learn, making sure that kids are not only reading ready to learn at kindergarten, but are functioning at grade level at third grade. And there's no more important institution to make that happen than the libraries. Schools and libraries partnering together are so critical to our success. We do a home visiting program where staff from Save the Children, who are all local folks from the communities, from rural America, are going in and working with parents for kids that are, birthed through the age of 4 or 5 before they transition to either pre-K or kindergarten Head Start programs. And we run Head Start programs, and Save the Children also runs programs in school, after school, and in the summertime, not only in Kentucky, but as I say, all across the country. And I'm sure Shane, I've missed a few things here, but Shane will jump in a minute and say a little bit more about it. But I'm so excited again, Dreama, to be joining Jennifer and Shane and you and all of the folks that are doing such important work to make sure that kids are exposed to written word. They're exposed to the importance of literacy, that you can't do math or science if you can't read. And that's why SAVE has focused so much on literacy for decades. And we obviously do a lot of work now around food, making sure that kids in rural America who aren't necessarily in some cases in school on a regular basis are also fed. So we're really making sure they have full bellies and full minds. I could go on and on, but I won't. Jane, why don't you jump in, tell everybody what I've forgotten or should have said about that before you introduce Jennifer, okay? Please.
And no, Mark, I think that was one of your better introductions there. I got to give you credit for that one. I know Garner, was that a foreshadowing of a campaign ticket coming up? I don't know, Jen, you on board for that someday? But no, Mark, I think the part you sold yourself short is the part you focus on the most is the advocacy work too. So we are committed to that on the ground programming, helping kids and families in rural communities, but also lifting up the voice of those folks from rural communities to make sure their voice is heard in the state capitals and in Washington, D.C. So that the resources are flowing to those communities and the supports are in place that we know kids and families and communities need. But I want to turn it over to our good friend, our trustee, Jennifer Garner, who has been with us for more than a decade. Jennifer is the most down-to-earth person I know. And she's committed to rural communities, and I just wanted her to share a bit about her background and why rural for her.
Hi, good morning. Hello, everyone. I'm so excited. I've had a lot of coffee. My daughter is turning 12 today. I got up early to bake and I have a cake in the oven. And ever since when she was turning 2, I said, "What kind of cake do you want, Sarah?" And she said, "A blue one." And so every year since then, I've made her a blue cake. So there is blue frosting waiting for blue cake. Anyway, we're talking books today and I couldn't be more excited. Rural America, it was an obvious choice for something for me to focus on. When I suddenly found myself, growing up in West Virginia, I moved to New York. I thought, gosh, I don't even know what I thought I would do with my life, but all I had ever done was read, write, be in local plays in Charleston, West Virginia. And then I worked in Atlanta, Georgia. I worked all over the country in these tiny little theaters and ended up in New York City. And as soon as I found myself with a little bit of a voice, I said, who is helping kids in rural West Virginia? Who's helping kids in Kentucky? Who's helping kids like my mom, who grew up super poor in Locust Grove, Oklahoma? And of course, that took me to Save the Children and to Mark. And this is our 13th year together in Save the Children Bliss. I've been so lucky to get to crisscross the country with Mark, to get to visit Berea, Kentucky, Hazard, Kentucky, all over with Shane, by myself, with Mark, so many times to see our gorgeous work there. And I know personally the difference that a librarian can make to a child, because my elementary school librarian I spoke to last week, I called her Mom McCann growing up. I still do. I've spoken about her all over the place. Once in Oprah magazine, if you want to look her up there. Anyway, she opened up my mind. She made me feel special. She wasn't judging me in any way. And she just fed me one book after another. She saw an interest and she really just went with it. She let me come in on my during lunch or recess or after school and help her shelves books. She put an old refrigerator box in her library and we painted it. And I would go and sit in there and write my stories when I was little. And it was just that person making me feel special, that it just fed my love of learning, which fed my imagination, which turned into, this weird job that I have. So you cannot see anyone who loves librarians and books and libraries more than I do. I love going with Save the Children into a school that has absolutely nothing, but there's one teacher who's passionate about matching the right book to the right child. And they just, cobble together books from Save the Children. They use resources in the best way possible. And they make sure that they know their kids and they know just what to hand those kids. And somebody that I know who's better at pulling together than just about anyone is Shane Garver. So yesterday, as we were prepping for this call, I said, Shane, just join us, because there is no one more inventive or exciting when it comes to just making the most of standing up and asking for what your community could use to do better, to be better, to serve the kids and families better than Shane. So hopefully he'll be a big part of this conversation, and let's get started.
Great. Thank you, Jen. And I love that you shared your own story of a librarian. And I've been thinking a lot about why this network was important to me personally. And I think it is because of Mrs. Spangler. She was that librarian at the elementary school. And I went to a tiny elementary school in Lincoln County, and the librarian only came once a week. So the empty room was there throughout the week. But once a week, she came in and she brought this energy and she brought this feeling that's still with me. And it is that love of books and that connection. And I think, we all have those librarians that were life-changing for us. And Shane, what about you? Is there a librarian that sort of sticks in your mind, or Mark, is there one?
Yeah, I'm happy to hop in here first. So as I think, back to childhood, I didn't have a lot of stability in my childhood. It was kind of a rough growing up, and I had to look for stability outside of the home. And one of the key places where I found that stability was Miss Pat. So Burton, Ohio, Northeast Ohio, Amish country, or rural community, Miss Pat was the librarian there. And I want to say to the librarians on the call, you probably have those kiddos that are at the library all the time. And you're thinking to yourself, does this kid's parents think that the library is free babysitting service? Well, first of all, I want to tell you, yes, that kid's parents thinks the library is free babysitting service. But let me encourage you that kid needs you more than you know. And the impact that Miss Pat had on me, I'm getting emotional just thinking about it now, and the impact that you guys are having on those kids. And so there's 4 things that I really learned from my library experience in Miss Pat. The first one was service. It was my first opportunity to serve. She figured, well, Shane, since you're going to be here all the time anyways, let's put you to work. And, so I started I've shelved my fair share of books, during the day. And as I got a little bit older, the summer reading program, I got an opportunity to mentor other kids who are part of the summer reading program and have them read to me. The second thing I learned from the library was about entrepreneurship. I still remember it was this game on the computer, the lemonade stand and the apple cart. And if you charged a little bit more for your lemonade, or you advertised a little bit more, you had to find this sweet spot of where were you going to make the most money at. Too much advertising cuts into your bottom line, not enough, didn't get the word out. And then later on, as I was older, the speakers and the folks with different careers that they would bring in and do workshops at the library. So I think entrepreneurship and that spark is something that libraries are critically positioned, especially in our rural communities, to help support. The third was access to resources, both learning materials, but also practical stuff like a computer. When I grew up, I did not have a computer in the home. And this was at a time when in high school, all of my reports had to be typed. Now, I was very fortunate to get accepted into Berea College, full ride scholarship. But my grades would not have been good enough. That would not have been possible if it weren't for my ability to spend Sunday afternoons at the public library, typing up each one of those reports, and with Miss Pat providing me some mentorship, how to access the resources in that library and put that good report together. And then the fourth area is adult education. I saw this firsthand in my own life. Miss Pat in the public library was where my mom learned how to use a computer. And my mom was able to get a better job because of that adult ed that the library provided to her, which in turn really helped our family. So for me, this connection to library is personal and it's foundational. I'm excited we're able to, work with this network.
And Shane, I appreciate that. And it reminds me that librarians work cradle to career. And I think about, I was the first in my family to go to college, and then I went on to law school. And it really was the law school library where I found my home. And it hadn't occurred to me until you were sharing that story. The librarian let me come in and use her computer on the weekends to do the case briefs and things, because as one of the kids who didn't have the resources and the connections, I didn't have those, and I wasn't ready for law school. So it really is librarians at all levels. It's just sort of hardwired into them. What about you, Mark? Is there a story or a connection you'd like to share?
I mean, Dreamer, I think the stories that Jen, and this is not something that Jennifer, brought up for this call. I've talked to her about this over the past, that connection to her librarian. And I didn't know all that what Shane just shared, which is, unbelievably beautiful. It makes me, and I'm reading some of the comments that are coming in here, it makes me so excited that this network is being established. And to Shane's earlier point about the importance of a network like this staying engaged, staying involved, and pushing for our needs and for our communities is really important. And Shane talked about our work in politics, right, Dreama? And if you don't get into that arena that Teddy Roosevelt talked about, the public arena, and push for the needs of our communities, then no one's going to do it. I mean, you just heard a number of examples, yours as well, of changing experiences. I mean, my mother used to drag us over to a public library, which is about a mile from our house. We were in kind of a suburban area. And every time we drive by it, right on Old Georgetown Road, or Democracy Boulevard, rather, I say to the kids, that's where Grandma used to attend. We know, and I just remember going over there and wondering what was going on here. What are all these books? And you'd study, and it's the same, it's a very similar experience in high school and in college about being with the librarian and those folks running the show and providing a safe place to study. It was outside, in my case, a dorm room in college. Examples countless times, but the folks that are on this call that are doing this amazing work for the younger Shane Garvers and Jennifer Garners of the world and Dreama Gentrys of the world, we got to make sure we stay together and that we push for resources to make sure that those young kids can get that experience, can go to Berea College, or can go to law school, or can go to college like Jennifer did, and move on to a career as an actor. These folks are planting seeds that are going to blossom into big trees over the next few decades. If we do it alone, we're not going to get the resources to keep these institutions going, and that's exactly what they are. They're central to the community. Anyways, Dreama, I'm talking too much. Did you want to fire off questions, or how do you want to go?
So I just got a couple questions. I think that, in rural places when we work, it really is about knowing each other and getting to know. And I think the stories of why we're doing this is critically important. But Shane, you mentioned entrepreneurism, and I've never met, some librarians who are not entrepreneurs, right? And Jennifer, you're an entrepreneur. And any advice you have to these librarians that are pulling things together for their community on how they can activate others or work together? Any thoughts you have from them as an entrepreneur?
Mine would be, it would be two things. One, your library will thrive if people feel safe there. If moms feel like it's the place to take their baby for the first read aloud or the first whatever. And if grown-ups feel safe who don't know how to read and who are coming in for some basic adult help. And if kids feel safe who feel like maybe an outcast, you know, who are a little bit different from the cheerleader type or, you know, or the athletes and just want somewhere to land that where they feel known and seen and they can escape into just the right book. So if your library or the room in your school or whatever you have devoted that you get to your kingdom, then right there, you're successful. But beyond that, it really is just about using this community or looking up different ideas and just trying them and see what sticks. Just don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to reach out to Save the Children and say, hey, do you have any books you could donate? I could really use something from birth to 5. I just don't have enough picture books. Don't be afraid, because we can't say yes to everyone, but you never know. We would love to be helpful to wherever we can be. And don't be afraid to reach out to other librarians and say, you know, what are you doing for teenagers right now? I'm totally at a loss. They're wreaking havoc or whatever it is. The more you can just invite kids in, with a puzzle to spend 5 minutes on, or, you know, or markers and paper to color on, or whatever it is that makes your library feel like someone's safe place, that's the beginning right there.
And that really is going back to that libraries are the heart of a community, whether they're in the school or whether they're in the public library. Shane, as you think about the work of Save the Children, what are some of your aspirations for this network? How do you see this network evolving?
You know, I think some of it is what Jen hit on at being the center of the community. As I think about rural America, there's 3 things that come to mind that I see consistently as I travel across the US. In rural communities, there's schools, there's volunteer fire departments, and there's public libraries. So we may start a volunteer fire department, you know, network next, I'm not sure. But I think public libraries are a critical linchpin in the community. Everything that gets done in rural America, it's because of relationships. And who has more relationships than that librarian that's at the heart of the community? I really feel like they have their pulse on what's going on in the community and what are the resources that are available out there and what are the needs that are out there. So I'm excited about being able to engage their voice in some of the advocacy work that Mark has been talking about and lifting that up. I'm excited about learning from them. You know, as an organization that works on behalf of rural communities, we know a good bit, but we don't know everything. And so that two-way conversation that this network can help create, and then the partnerships in the community of practice that will occur. You know, as you guys are mentioning, the sharing of ideas for teenage programming across the network with each other, so that we're not reinventing the wheel. And then the ability to bring in more resources. That's part of our aspiration with this network, is to be bringing to light ways to generate more resources. No one stretches a dollar farther than a public librarian, I know, and you could always use a bit more. And then hoping, as Save the Children and Partners for Education, to bring additional resources to communities ourselves.
So thinking about going forward with this, you know, our focus back in December was on 3rd grade reading, because we know that's the most important piece. And we're looking at doing some stuff later in April around college access and family engagement. But some of the questions that we've gotten in here is around COVID. And, you know, that we're working in this time of this pandemic and the virtual piece. Shane, I know there's been some things, Mark, that Save the Children has done during COVID to still serve communities. Anything you want to share about how you all have flexed and innovated during COVID?
I mean, Shane can jump in here with more details than I can, but I think it's really, I did mention the importance of feeding kids, which is a huge issue that the schools were potentially addressing proactively. And then when schools close, and they're working on such narrow margins, Shane mentioned libraries working on narrow margins in rural America. Schools are also in that places. I'm sure everybody on this call knows. So we have been working very closely with school systems to, increase the amount of their ability to deliver food, getting food out through school buses, vans, getting those resources out there because and to combine that with educational supplies, because a lot of these schools don't have the resources to get educational supplies and food out to children who are living, miles and miles away from the school. So that was a big shift for us under the COVID situation. Shane, you can jump in and talk about some of the fun stuff and really creative stuff that a bunch of our staff, our home visitors have been doing, actually bringing resources to the parents and homes, working outdoors when the weather is okay. Go ahead, Shane, jump in.
Yeah, so, as Mark mentioned, we're critically concerned about a couple of different things, during this closure. One is making sure, first and foremost, kids are fed. We know 30 million kids each day rely on that free breakfast, that free lunch at school. And with schools closed, schools are making a Herculean effort, but need some additional support to make sure, especially in rural communities, those kids in the outlying areas can get access to that needed food. The second area, though, is learning loss. And I think this is a real area where libraries can step in and contribute, both in the short term and the innovation and problem solving, but also in the long-term recovery. We know things like in a typical summer in low-income communities, kids lose 2 to 3 months in reading and math ability anyways, and that's during normal times. Coming out of this pandemic, kids are going to need hands-on support more than ever. So we've done a lot of creative things working with our school and our community partners to get those learning resources to kids at home now to help mitigate some of the loss. But I also think there's a real opportunity for libraries to play a role in supporting some of that catch-up work, post-pandemic. And I think you're critically well positioned to do that. In a normal year when the school ends, it's the librarians that spring into action with those summer reading programs. I think those are going to be needed now more than ever. And then the last area that we've been focusing on is just keeping our families and communities safe. And so I think about places like Holly Hill in Orangeburg, South Carolina, where the public librarian partnered with our community engagement staff to really spearhead a whole of community effort. In Holly Hill is part of Orangeburg. It's a big geographic county. And like many rural communities, families often lack adequate transportation to get into the center of town. So the librarian in Holly Hill brought the town and the resources to her local community members. And they set up these outdoor pop-up events where folks could get access to food from the local Farmers to Families food program and the food bank. They could get COVID testing. They could complete their census. They could register to vote. They could get access to books and other learning materials so that they can be supporting their kids at home. And they could get access to a number of other community resources. But it was really that public librarian in partnership with our team that was the organizers of all of that. And I think that's something that during the pandemic, we could be replicating, that you could be replicating in towns all across the US that would help meet a critical need for families.
And I think, it's our February webinar for the first official webinar of the network. The topic actually is innovation that's come about around COVID. So we're really looking for folks here that have innovative practices, and many have been shared in the chat, and we'll save those, but we'll be featuring some librarians from different rural places and their innovation during COVID during our next webinar.
You see it, Dream. I'm sorry for interrupting, but you see it in a bunch of the comments going in there. Really nice comments about, say, the children's work in Owsley County and how librarians are, really community organizers. They're doing such wonderful work. And I heard today, or maybe it was yesterday, that Dr. Biden, Joe Biden's wife's first event is going to be on January 25th with the American Library Association. And what we need to do, thinking out loud here, is Jennifer was on the board. When Shane said Jennifer was the trustee, she's on, essentially meant she was on the board of Save the Children is on the board, and Dr. Biden was the board chair for a couple of years there. Maybe we should get her to come out here and hear these stories about what's going on in rural America and what rural librarians are doing and the different struggles they have, right, as compared to those that are in urban or suburban areas. It's a big country. I see everybody from East Coast to the West Coast on this call. We should get, the rural needs up on Dr. Biden's agenda and make sure that that's addressed on the federal level, not only in the executive office, but in the legislature and Congress as well. Sorry, Dream, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just.
No, that's wonderful. And that's exactly what we're envisioning with this network, Mark, is how do we take and use our voices? And Jennifer, you're one of the folks that I'm most impressed with how you've used your voice to give voice to children, families. Any suggestions on how people can step into owning and giving voice to their communities and what's important to them?
I don't know that I'm an expert, but I do think that people love to hear a great story. And I think especially if the story is just shows some optimism and shows you're just a great idea and how you've pushed through. I mean, certainly I'm always happy to hear a great story about what rural libraries are out there doing. If you make a little video and something fun, make sure to send it my way. But I think just something that celebrates kids learning, families doing better, families figuring something out in a hard time, because we're all overwhelmed by how much there is that's tough in the world right now. And we're all just equally so inspired by a little story of somebody figuring out a way to make things better, just a little bit better for someone. And man, I wish I had a video of those pop-ups, Shane, all the different, because really, I mean, it goes back to think when we were all little in Charleston, West Virginia. I remember getting a certificate for a personal pan pizza if I read a certain amount of books. That was the biggest deal. Pizza Hut was new. We didn't have many chains. That was like the biggest deal in my entire childhood. And now there is not a summer that I do not trot my kids to the library to sign up for the reading challenge, even though I know they're really good readers. I know they'll read, but it's just the feeling of earning your own personal pan pizza. And that was the beginning of, or at least in my mind, of librarians reaching out to a business and saying, hey, can you do something for these kids? Can we get kids? We can help get kids in your restaurant if you will work with us. And that's the beginning. But my gosh, there's pie in the sky, limitless.
And it is that positive piece, right? Of recognizing and sharing that and sharing, that piece of it. And, I'll close us out here with books, right? We all are doing this because we have this love of books. And I know the folks here, we're all parents. And so we also have worked to share that. So our last question, and we'll just go round robin, is what's the book that you pull out either for your child or you think of that gives you that warm feeling that keeps you inspired? Is there a title you'd like to share with this group? And I sprung this question on y'all. So this is, I'm curious.
I guess I'll jump in there because I've never seen Shane and Jennifer quiet. So this is a new experience. We did Goodnight Moon ad nauseum. I know it's everybody talks about Goodnight Moon, but we just read that over and over to the kids, and the kids loved it. I did take our kids to the school library at their elementary school a couple years when they were younger, and the Butter Battle book by Dr. Seuss is actually about nuclear war, and it's unbelievably beautifully, written, and they love the rhyming, even though at whatever 4 or 5 years of age, they had no idea it was about war. It's a beautiful. Dr. Seuss books are so good, right? And love him. I don't know, Jen, Shane, anybody? Jennifer Garner reads more books to her children, and her kids read more books than anybody I've ever met. So this could take the rest of the call, Dreama.
Oh my gosh. I don't even know. Like, it makes my heart go fast to talk. It's like, how do I tell you all the books that mean something? I mean, for my kids, I still read. My 12-year-old and I are about to finish the Guernsey Literary Potato Peel Pie Society, whatever that book is. We're about to finish that. My son and I just started Artemis Fowl. We just finished The Boy Named Christmas. My eldest daughter and I have been trying to get through The Importance of Being Earnest forever, but she goes to bed too late and I just can't. But it's harder to read with her. But we did Crimes of the Heart. Now we're reading plays. But I still read every single night of the world with them. I love it so much. But a real rite of passage at my house is when you're old enough, your first chapter book here is Charlotte's Web. And I have yet to read the ending out loud without having to hide my face in a pillow and cry. And my kids all make fun of me that I cannot read the end of Charlotte's Web, but I can't, and I never will. And my mom read to me straight through middle school. We read all of Anne of Green Gables out loud to each other. We read all of James Herriot, which now I realize is so bawdy. We read all of, all of C.S. Lewis. And it's just, they're my most cherished memories. So yes, I love picture books and I would love to just go on a deep dive with all of you about picture books. But chapter, like middle school and upper school chapter books, and my son and I just finished the 7th Harry Potter plus Cursed Child. Amazing. Okay, your turn, Shane.
I mean, is there any time left, or do we have time left?
I just barely scraped the surface. I know that people here understand.
They definitely do, and they're writing back about Charlotte's Web and Click Clack Moo and those ones too. But I mean, you just rattled off about 20 books right off the top of your head.
When Jen retires from acting, I think she wants to go back to be a librarian. I think that's next for you, right?
That was when I was little. I wanted to grow up and be a librarian and a children's book author. So we'll just see.
Yeah. So for me as a child, there's 2 different series. So the Boxcar Children, of course, and then Billy and Blaze. I don't know if everybody's heard of Billy and Blaze, but Billy and Blaze was all about adventure. Now, my wife, for a number of years, she was a kindergarten, a first, a second grade teacher. When she got her first classroom, I went out on Amazon and found all of those. Like, she had never heard of Billy and Blaze. Like, your kids have to read these. It was that important to me that I found them on Amazon. I bought the whole set for her classroom to make sure her kiddos had them. And then the book that I would say to a high school senior, I graduated, and I got this as a graduation gift. And reading it as a senior versus reading it as a 5-year-old is completely different. But Oh, the Places You Will Go. Reading that as a senior, like the inspiration that was, like that still sticks with me. So that one's special to me too.
And dang it, Shane, you took mine. That was mine.
Oh, did I?
Yeah, and I give it to folks at graduation, at commencement. I've given it to folks going through a hard time, and I bring it out when I have a hard time, because to me, it is that continual inspiration. So I want to thank you all for joining me today. I'm excited about the network. I'm excited about doing this together collaboratively. I've got a couple slides on future events, but does anybody have a last word they'd like to get in before we?
Dreamer, I just want to reemphasize how important it is to stick together, and the value of partnerships, and the value of the individual voice, but also the collective voice. I think it's just critical when times are tough that we stick together, and that we raise the visibility of our needs together, that our collective voices. I was in the state legislature in Maryland for 8 years. When one person comes in, you listen, but when 10 people come in, that's a bigger meeting. And the people you have on this call are the essence of the community. They're the backbone of the community. They're the fabric, the institutions, whatever word you want to use there. And I mean it sincerely. And if we stick together, it can have a big impact on the state level, or the local level, the state level, and the federal level. And if you don't think 1 or 2 people make a difference, politicians realize how close elections are, and they respond to money and they respond to votes. And if we keep organized and keep the pressure on them, we should start seeing more investments in rural America. It just irritates the hell out of me that, the lack of resources in public libraries and public schools with books. And the chat around here has just been so fantastic. That's why I want to get Dr. Biden in here to learn about it and get people fired up and make a difference here. Anyways, Jennifer, Shane, I didn't talk too much there. Stick together and stay in this network.
Shane, Jennifer, any last word before we go to the technical stuff?
No, let's get technical for me. But I am interested in what, what is the plan? Does everybody on here already know how to talk to each other and where they're sticking together and what they're doing?
That's some of the things we're working out, and we're going to ask for volunteers from this group to join with us and plan with us. So that's a piece of this. Anything, Shane, that you want to add before we get to some of the slides of the next webinar? And
sure, I get, so a couple practical next steps. We're bringing on a director of this network to help reach out and engage with you all and to harvest some of those best practices and good ideas and help facilitate that communication across the network to bring resources and ideas to you all, but also to learn from you to bring those to others. And so there's going to be a series of monthly webinars for us to join together around some of that, but communication in the interim once we have that director on board, and are really keenly interested in hearing from you all about those good ideas to share with each other and support each other.
And we are accepting applications for that director. I'll do a shameless plug. Berea.edu. If you go on there, we're actually soliciting applications for the director. We hope to have that director on board within the next 2 months. And Sam, you have a couple slides here for us that have the dates. So everyone that is here, you're now part of our mailing list. And so you'll get emails from us about the future events. And as we have a director, we will be developing out more sophisticated ways to communicate. So on February 3rd is our next webinar, and it's thinking outside the box, innovations during COVID. We've saved everything you've put in the chat box here. So we'll be pulling and compiling some of these innovations that were shared here today. But if you would be interested in sending us additional ideas, you can do that. And March 3rd, our March webinar will be on resources, funding opportunities, linking to resources. And so that'll be our March event. And then in April, oh, thank you, Penny, for putting in the link to the director of position that's on our website. In the April 26th to 30th, we're doing College Access and Success Summit Week. And that is a week-long summit, and there will be actually a special library track offered during that summit. So those are some upcoming events in February, March, and April. And hopefully by the time we get to the summit, we'll have our director of the network in place, and we'll have built out other ways for us to communicate. So I think that's it today, guys. I want to thank you all for, oh, sorry, one more thing. I always forget this one, the fellowship. So we have funding from the Institute of Museum and Library Services to underwrite a fellowship that's a deep dive into third grade reading for 22 librarians from across the country that work in rural places. And the fellowship will be an intensive year to year and a half experience. Thanks to the partnership with Save the Children, the fellows will receive dollars to support a third grade reading project in their community. And fellows will also receive a stipend to support their participation. And so the email here, Katie Basham's email is listed. If you're interested in becoming a fellow and applying for the fellowship, please reach out to Katie and connect with Katie. So those are the upcoming events for the network. And we're really excited. And I want to thank Shane, Jennifer, and Mark for joining me today at the launch. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you taking the time today, and also just the partnership between Partners for Education and Save the Children. We couldn't do what we're doing or trying to do without you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys. We'll all sign off, but you guys can continue to put notes. And if you have questions or comments in the chat, please keep doing that. We'll be saving all of those.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.